U.S. Congressman, Commander raise harsh warnings if China attacks Taiwan. The China-Mexican drug cartel, U.S. shoplifting connection. Raimondo inspected Chinese economy. Beijing will turn its face at any time. It's all covered in today's China Truths. U.S. Congressman, Commander raise harsh warnings if China attacks Taiwan. A delegation of the U.S. Armed Services Committee visited Taiwan on Friday, September 1, to find measures to support the island in defense aid. According to the AP, the congressional delegation, led by the committee's Vice Chair Rob Wittman, warned that if China attacks Taiwan, it will face a resolute reaction from the United States. In a speech ahead of meetings with Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen, Wittman said, "Know that any hostile unprovoked attack on Taiwan will result in a resolute reaction from the U.S." Wittman, along with two other congressmen, Carlos Jimenez and Jen Kiggins, are making a 3-day visit to Taiwan. They are meeting with Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen and the country's National Security Council Chairman Wellington Koo. Under the U.S. law, Washington will provide Taiwan with the means to defend itself and treat all threats to the island as matters of grave concern. However, it remains ambiguous on whether the U.S. would commit forces in response to an attack from China. Taiwan is a self-governing democratic island that split from mainland China in 1949 after the end of a civil war, but China insists Taiwan is its territory. In recent years, Taiwan has faced increasing military harassment as Chinese fighter jets and Navy ships have held exercises aimed at the island, often coming near the island or encircling it. To boost its defense, Taiwan has bought $19 billion worth of military items from the United States, but most of that remains undelivered. The U.S. congressional delegation promised to resolve the $19 billion backlog in its defense purchases from the U.S. Wittman said, "We have an obligation to make sure that we fill the backlog of foreign military sales that exist now between our countries." He added that both Republicans and Democrats in the U.S. Congress are working on the issue. In July, a U.S. commander also issued a stern warning to China, saying that if there is an attack from China to Taiwan, Beijing will see a scene of hell. Admiral John Aquilino, commander of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, warned in July that the U.S. military's task is to ensure China does not dare to act rashly and that Beijing's war would be devastating to the Chinese people. Recently, Admiral Aquilino said that if a war breaks out in the Western Pacific in the future, the U.S. military will attack 1,000 Chinese targets within 24 hours. In order to realize this operational concept, the Indo-Pacific Command and the U.S. Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, are developing a project, codenamed Hellscape, develops a control system that can manipulate a large number of drones to simultaneously swarm and attack a large number of enemy targets in a short period of time. Taiwan strategy expert Lin Tinghui commented that Admiral Aquilino means that the real goal of the U.S. military is to destroy China's attack capability at the beginning of the Communist Army's attack, that is, to paralyze China. At a recent conference, U.S. Deputy Secretary of Defense Kathleen Hicks also said that the Pentagon will use strong military power to offset the numerical superiority of China's army. She said that the Department of Defense will deploy thousands of autonomous systems in multiple fields in the next 18 to 24 months, and will use a large number of cheap drones to simultaneously attack a large number of targets in wartime. The U.S. Department of Defense's statement is very important because it shows that the United States has changed from strategic ambiguity to constructive strategic clarity towards Taiwan. U.S. President Joe Biden has said 4 times that he would assist Taiwan in terms of defense. Their statements were followed by actions. In July, the United States announced a military aid worth $345 million in a major package drawing on America's own stockpiles, and it is finding new ways to support Taiwan in defense aid. On August 30th, the U.S. government approved the first-ever U.S. military transfer to Taiwan under a program generally reserved for assistance to sovereign, independent states. The amount was $80 million. The China-Mexican drug cartel U.S. shoplifting connection. China is playing a big role in supporting organized theft groups in the U.S., which is managed by Mexican drug cartels. Clearly, Beijing's out-of-reach financial system has been making the cartel's wide-ranging criminality possible, whether it be selling sex slaves, poisoning Americans with fentanyl or retail theft in U.S.'s cities. This disguised war waged by China is exposed in the article The China-Mexican Drug Cartel Shoplifting Connection, published September 1, from author Thomas McCardle, who used to be White House speechwriter for President George W. Bush. Americans for many years have been inflamed about the violent crime that accompanies the millions of illegal immigrants who become permanent U.S. residents via our unsecured southern border. For instance, the 4 young men bust into New York City from Texas who a few months ago drove to Long Island and allegedly stole close to $12,500 worth of merchandise from a Macy's. All were freed to continue to live illegally within the United States. 2 were released without bail while the other 2 posted bonds for modest amounts. Several aspects of the radicalism that now dominates the Democratic Party are at play here: the de facto decriminalization of illegal entry into America, tolerance to the point of implicit encouragement of shoplifting and rioting since the death while in police custody of George Floyd in 2020, and numerous George Soros-financed soft-on-crime prosecutors who squelch the requirement of cash bail and unleash violent offenders back onto the street soon after their arrest, rendering police impotent and humiliated. But it goes far beyond a mere domestic political agenda of chronic urban lawlessness, the import of dependable votes for Democrats, and a perpetual racial discord begging the heavy hand of big government. It should shock and alarm Americans to recognize that 2 enemies of this country, and the ordered liberty, free market system, and rule of law on which its way of life is based, are directly involved in the new epidemic of organized retail crime, the Chinese Communist Party and Mexican drug cartels. After years of making billions of dollars and killing thousands of Americans through their smuggling of mainland Chinese-made fentanyl across the border, Mexico's cartels are overseeing what U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, described over a year ago, neglecting to identify the foreign entities behind the crime, as organized theft groups who engage in large-scale thefts which rely on teams of boosters who steal goods from major retail stores, cleaners who disguise the origins of stolen merchandise, fencers who resell products through brick-and-mortar fronts and major e-commerce websites, and professional money launderers who funnel illicit profits to criminals orchestrating schemes. In many instances, organized theft groups resort to violence or violent threats against employees of retail companies. Long before COVID-19, laboratories in Wuhan and central China were producing most of the fentanyl consumed within the United States. The Drug Enforcement Administration's, DEA, 2019 National Drug Threat Assessment Report stated that Asian money laundering organizations, MLOs, are working in conjunction with Hispanic DTOs, drug trafficking organizations, with increasing frequency. Various FDs, DEA field divisions, have observed Mexican DTOs increasingly utilizing domestic Asian operatives to facilitate drug money movement across a variety of methods, including TBML, trade-based money laundering, CUBS, Chinese underground banking system, virtual currencies, and even bulk currency storage and shipment. The cartels are also active in human trafficking and firearm smuggling. Shoplifting rings run by Mexican drug cartels resell stolen goods and use Chinese money launderers to send the money made back to Mexico. The National Retail Federation's 2022 Retail Security Survey found that organized retail crime, ORC, and other forms of external theft cost $94.5 billion in losses, up from $90.8 billion in 2020 for U.S. retailers. As a direct result, an average family will have to pay about $500 extra every year as retailers raise their prices to compensate for losses from stolen goods. ICE's Homeland Security investigations described how professional thieves known as boosters travel and cruise throughout the country utilizing aliases, rental vehicles, and tools such as booster bags and illegally acquired security keys to steal high-value merchandise. The booty is then sold cheap to a fencer who utilizes e-commerce websites like eBay and Amazon to pull in an optimum amount of cash. Prosecutors of Chicago-based Chinese figures working with Mexican cartels on drug money observed in 2021 that a relatively small network of Chinese money brokers based in Mexico have come to dominate international money laundering markets. A particular method used, requiring only hours, was a mirror swap involving Chinese businessmen in Mexico and US-based Chinese brokers who transfer Chinese currency between bank accounts in mainland China, with no money wired directly from the United States to China, thus bypassing the US banking system. The cash's ultimate destination was Mexico. Clearly, Beijing's out-of-reach financial system has been making the cartel's wide-ranging criminality possible, whether it be selling sex slaves, poisoning Americans with fentanyl, or retail theft in this country's cities. It's an axis of enemies waging a disguised war against the United States, an onslaught far different from the open warfare of Nazi Germany or the Cold War nuclear threat practiced for decades by the Soviet Union. Raimondo inspected Chinese economy. Beijing will turn its face at any time. On August 30th, U.S. Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo concluded her 4-day visit to China. During this period, the two sides made no concessions to each other on key issues and did not reach any agreement. However, they restored formal communication channels that had been interrupted for many years. The analysis pointed out that the communication mechanism may be overthrown by Beijing, who does not keep its promise at any time, and Ms. Raimondo may also take advantage of her visit to China to inspect the Chinese economy on the spot, so as to have more countermeasures against Beijing in the next economic war. U.S. and China restart business talks, but no agreement reached. Bloomberg reported on August 31st that U.S. Commerce Secretary Raimondo won a commitment to resume U.S.-China business talks, a key step in the two sides' quest to ease tensions. But U.S. companies are wondering whether that's enough to get them back in a market that looks increasingly risky. Ms. Raimondo said restoring formal channels of communication that had been severed for years as relations soured would provide some predictability for U.S. businesses. However, on the last day of her visit to China, she also revealed in a meeting with Mr. Chen Jining, secretary of the Shanghai Municipal Party Committee, that foreign capital is gradually losing patience. American companies told her that if China does not reform, it may become unable to invest. Reports say Ms. Raimondo is the person China really wants to see. As Commerce Secretary, she oversaw export controls on Chinese companies such as Huawei. Raimondo's signal could spur the investment China needs to revive a slowing economy and reverse a 25-year low in foreign direct investment. Perhaps the most astonishing was the warm reception given to her by Chinese officials. During the meeting with Ms. Raimondo, Mr. Li Chang said that China is promoting efforts to ease market access and treat foreign companies in the same way as domestic companies. Even so, it will be very difficult to restore U.S.-China relations. China did not hint that it might reconsider the ban on micron technology. Ms. Raimondo also rejected China's request to cancel investment restrictions and export controls. Bloomberg geoeconomics analyst Jennifer Welch said, in Raimondo's words, what she reached is to restart the dialogue. If the two sides can accept lower expectations, try to promote small improvements, and avoid major risks, maybe we can. The best possible outcome. Ms. Raimondo announced on August 28 that the United States and China agreed to establish new communication channels on economic and trade exchanges, including a new commercial affairs working group and export control information exchange mechanism. She also said that this is the biggest achievement of this visit to China and a big step forward. Expert, the regular communication mechanism may be overthrown by Beijing at any time. Mr. Song Guocheng, a senior researcher at the International Relations Research Center of National Chengchi University in Taiwan, said in an interview on August 31 that Ms. Raimondo believes that she has established a regular communication mechanism with China, but the communication mechanism may be overthrown by Beijing at any time. For example, he said that after Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, Beijing overthrew the 8 communication mechanisms established with the United States in one go. The biggest achievement is Ms. Raimondo's wishful expectation. A regime whose treaties can be torn up, this regular communication mechanism may be overthrown by the CCP at any time. Mr. Song Guocheng said that the United States believes that it cannot invest in China. Beijing used the anti-espionage law to harass American companies and imposed a ban on Micron without any explanation. At the same time, Beijing asked the United States to restrict technology export controls and revoke the ban on foreign investment, etc. Ms. Raimondo also refused. Analysis: Raimondo took the opportunity to inspect the field. There will be countermeasures in the economic war. Commentator Wang Yi said that Ms. Raimondo's greatest achievement during this trip was her field trip to China. After contacting the new leadership team of the CCP, especially the economic team, she gained a perceptual and intuitive understanding of the Chinese economy. He said, Biden said that the Chinese economy is a ticking time bomb. After Raimondo's on-the-spot investigation, the United States-China policy, especially in terms of economic warfare, should have many follow-up countermeasures. Mr. Wang he believes that the United States has a lot of experience in economic warfare. During the Cold War, it disintegrated the Soviet Union. Now it uses this experience to deal with Beijing and has achieved great results. The economic gap between the United States and China is widening. The situation of the struggle between the two sides has changed a lot since the Trump period, and the advantage of the United States is getting bigger and bigger. Beijing is now asking for help from the United States and is very passive. He said, under such circumstances, if Raimondo's visit to China is humble, it has a deeper purpose. Raimondo has established a stable communication mechanism with the CCP, which is to deceive outsiders. He believes that the United States is also putting more and more pressure on Beijing's policies. Before Ms. Raimondo's visit, Biden met with her specially, and had already formed a list of the demands made by the American business and political circles. Based on this, Ms. Raimondo drew a red line for Beijing and asked Beijing to make concessions. Ms. Raimondo made a request to Beijing during her visit when China's economy was in great difficulty. If you, Beijing, don't retreat, then you will be stuck in the neck. Let's see how the CCP responds. If the CCP does not make substantive concessions, nothing will be discussed. Mr. Wang said that as the other party in the negotiation, the United States must have conditions if it is asked to make concessions on technology export restrictions. First, Beijing should not make trouble in Taiwan. Otherwise, in the military confrontation between the United States and China, the United States will not be able to relax its technical control. Second, the United States is a global hegemonic country. Beijing harasses the United States in the South Pacific, Latin America, and Africa, and continues to engage in military expansion. Under such circumstances, it is impossible for the United States to relax technology controls. Beijing must self-limit its military strategic strength and nuclear weapons development. He said, without these two items, it is impossible for the Biden administration to make concessions to the CCP in terms of economy and trade. Don't forget to leave a comment in the section below to share your opinions on today's topic with us. Make sure to like and subscribe to see more interesting topics from China Truths.